Hey there, Ralph. How are you?
I'm doing great, Yvonne. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited about our guest today. We haven't had one of these on our show ever.
Yeah, I'm really excited as well. Such a good guy, has an incredible reputation here in Florida. Just somebody who's really honest and trustworthy, knows his stuff. And we get to talk about, a couple of issues, Yvonne, that you and I have been thinking through for a long time, right? First responders, presumptions. Love those topics in our workers' comp world.
That's right. So we have, I believe this is our first ever claimant attorney, Paolo Longo. He's from Florida, and we do sort of scratch the surface a little bit. Man, I could do a whole other series of shows on, getting into first responders, PTSD, and presumptions. But we did cover today the perspective of a claimant attorney and the injured worker's perspective in the workers' comp system. Are you ready to listen to that?
I am ready. Let's go do it.
Let's go do it. So, hello, Paolo. How are you?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. And tell our listeners where you are joining us from.
I am right now sitting in rainy Orlando, Florida.
Yeah, rainy and soggy, huh?
Yes, but we need it, though, so it's fine.
That's true. It's that way over here in Tampa as well. So before we get going, I want to ask a quick icebreaker question. And are you a sports fan, Paolo?
I am a sports fan. I am a big sports fan. Don't get me started.
So what is the last professional sports game you watched?
Well, 2 weeks ago I was in DC, and so I was at a Nationals game versus the Mets, and that was about 2 weeks ago.
Awesome. Very good. Rafael?
Last professional sport, Miami Open. We went down and saw some incredible tennis, both men and women's tennis. That was just incredible. Really, really fun.
Well, I'm sad to say the last pro sports game that I watched was when the Lightning lost out in their playoff bid for the Stanley Cup. So
again,
I was pretty upset.
Yeah, that's a heartbreaker.
Yeah,
it is. I keep saying our family is big fans, and I keep saying, "Hey, we had our day. It's been a while, but let's let some other folks have a turn, and then we'll get back at it."
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's get to talking about what we're talking about today, which is you are a claimant attorney here in Florida. You represent injured workers. So I'm going to let Ralph kick us off in our conversation, and this is going to be fun. We're excited.
I'm excited. Let's do it.
Paolo, it really is. This is such an honor and a privilege. I've been a fan for a long time. I'm really grateful that you have a little time for us here, because we're blessed to have you and really looking forward to this conversation with you. Give the folks out there a little bit of your background. How in the world did you end up becoming a plaintiff workers' comp lawyer?
I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse yet. That's still on the fence. I started out, I grew up in South Florida, and I started out at the state attorney's office in Dade County, jury trials and that kind of stuff. And I decided early in my career I needed to relocate. Miami is expensive, especially on a state attorney salary. So I was like, Orlando, that's a pretty good area. It's growing. And so I sent up a couple of resumes, and within about 30 minutes, I got a phone call from a big comp defense firm here, who the hiring partner was friends with the guy I interned with in law school. So he checked with him and was like, yeah, you hired this guy right away. So 30 minutes after sending a resume, guy pretty much offered me a job, over the phone. And I was like, well, what's workers' comp? I was used to trying, was being in a real courtroom, and juries and things like that. They're like, oh, we just non-jury trials and, injuries. And I was like, I can do that, And so I moved to Orlando, and that was the beginning of my comp. And I started getting into it. And, I did the defense work for a little while, but my heart wasn't 100% in it, so I switched over to the claimants. And so I've been doing claimants work for, I don't know, 20 years and some change. And was the best thing I ever fell into in my entire life is, doing comp. I couldn't see myself doing anything else, even though I didn't even know what workers' comp was. But I think it's been a fantastic ride so far.
Why? You are so good at it. I think you were built for it. You've got an incredible personality. You really have always been an amazing heart. You care about your clients and your practice, the way you do your business. So from your perspective, why have you enjoyed comp so much? What is it about it that has provided you such incredible joy?
Well, I mean, fortunately for me, I'm a one-trick pony, and I found the thing that I'm good at and that I like. Most people, don't get to do as their career something that they really love, and it was almost an accident, but it's been a great blessing. And I think what I really like about comp is that no 2 days are the same. I mean, 25 almost years, and I don't know, 3, 4, 5,000 cases, and you're never going to get the same one twice. And every single day is a different, it's a different case. It's a different issue. And the thing about comp that a lot of people don't realize, in my opinion, is that it touches so many other areas of law. So just because we do comp, we still have to know about Social Security. We still have to know about employment. We still have to know about, my practice specifically is not only claimants work, but my firm only represents pretty much first responders, right? So we're dealing with police and firefighters and things like that. And they have a lot of other, pension issues and health insurance liens. And so, personal injury law, old tort reform, or tort law. And so we've got to have a little bit of knowledge in a lot of different areas, and because you never know when your case is going to overlap another area like Social Security or pension or personal injury, employment, things like that we're always running into. And I get to talk to so many other different kinds of lawyers because maybe I can't help them with a certain aspect of their case. So I know employment lawyers and family lawyers and criminal lawyers and personal injury guys and pension folks and all kinds of stuff. So it's so interrelated with many other areas that every day is something new.
Love that. And so true about workers' comp generally, right? We touch so many other components of different laws that affect injured workers. Tell us a little bit about, and I knew that the firm and you specifically have been practicing first responder type law, right? So officers, firefighters, those type of folks. It's what you've been sort of narrowed in, really specialized in. Tell me a little more about that. Why did you go there? Why exactly, and how did that happen for the firm?
Well, I mean, see a need, fill a need, right? I mean, there's a lot of claimant lawyers out there doing workers' comp, but with our first responders in the state, they have some special they've got some special presumptions, right? So they get heart disease covered, hypertension, the cardiac issues are presumed to be work related. Whereas if you're working, a traditional regular job and, you've got a heart problem, that's not going to be covered by workers' comp. So, they get some special privileges. Also, we've spent a lot of time doing PTSD, right, for first responders. They've got a little bit of extra, benefit, just because of the nature of the work that they do. 20 something years ago, there wasn't really that many people doing this work. And so, we found a niche and got some cases and just sort of built up our practice to, the first responder law firm. So, we're trying to make sure that, these first responders that have, your traditional injuries, as well, but specifically and especially for, the cardiac presumption cases. I mean, it makes me feel really good when I get a client, a heart transplant, that person's gonna live, right? That makes you feel good. Making sure somebody, with a career-ending injury from law enforcement or fire service, is going to get, a lifetime of benefits, whether it's, under comp or whether it's a pension, things like that. So there's an extra level of specialness, I'd like to say, in representing, the folks that are out protecting and serving us.
Love that. Love that. And you guys really are here in Florida. That's what the firm is known for, right? That first responder practice. I can't think of any other law firm really that practices solely in that area or that has made the case law, the significance. I see you, all the time presenting out and about on the different issues in that particular area. Is it different, Paolo, than other claims, accidents in the course and scope of employment? What makes that particular niche so peculiar or so different?
Well, I mean, there are some boxes that you have to check, but once we do that, and we establish that the condition is presumed to be work related, I get to kind of be defense attorney. Once my burden of proof is met, the defense, the carrier and the defense lawyer get to essentially be a claimant lawyer, because now that they have the burden, they've got to show that the condition was caused by some other non-work related cause. So, once I do my work at the beginning and I can show that the presumption has been established, I kind of get to sit back and watch the defense lawyer, make a burden, which they're not really used to. So that's a little bit unique. But one of the great things about my practice is that just as there's not very many folks on my side, there aren't very many folks on the defense side that defend these cases. So I get to practice with some very, very good lawyers on the defense side. And there's just a very small pot. So we kind of, we're pretty close, and we work together well. So when you have folks that you can get along with on the other side, that just makes the job all that much better. We can agree to disagree, but my lot's very professional, at least the folks that I get to deal with and work with. And so that just makes the job that more enjoyable when you get to do it with somebody that you get along with. Even though we may disagree on some of the issues, we can disagree without being disagreeable, right? I think that somebody smart said that once.
Mm-hmm. Yvonne, I know that you work a great deal with this type of population as well, and you've had some great experience through the work that you're doing at IOH on first responders. Any questions for Paolo on that?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning, though. I'm going to go back to the basics, if you will. So, Paolo, again, thanks for joining us. I want to ask you, from your perspective, representing injured workers, what are some of the most common fears that they face when they're filing a claim? What are some of the things that are on their mind when that's happening?
The first question I get is, am I going to lose my job? Right? I mean, that's 90% of my clients. That's the first question. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to be able to go back to work? Can I finish my career? Again, because I'm doing first responders mostly, these folks, they want to go back to work, right? They became, first police or firefighters because it's a career. It's not a job. So, they want to get their 20 years or their 25 years, because they've got pensions and retirements and things like that. So, am I going to get fired? And, am I going to be able to go back to work? Right. I mean, that's the top questions that I get 3, 4, 10 times a day.
Sure. So having said that, would you say then that they don't really understand what their rights are or what the claims process is, and that's why they're asking you those questions?
Yeah, I mean, I think universally, they don't understand the process or the system. And typically my first responder clients are fairly sophisticated. Okay. They do their research. They're calling me and quoting statutes and regulatory rules and things like that. But just because they Google search it doesn't really mean that it's soaked in and they understand really a lot of the ramifications, of what it is. So I find I wouldn't call it frustrating, but one difficult aspect of doing this is that there just simply is a lack of education, right? I mean, people think, I'm going to file a workers' comp case, I'm going to go into work tomorrow and I'm going to get fired, or, I'm never going to be able to do my job again. I'm not going to be able to get care. I can't afford it, those type of things. So there is a big gap, I think in people's perception of the system.
So it's interesting that you use the word perception. So I'm going to maybe come back to that a little bit. But so how would you say communication plays into this whole big picture? So injured worker, first responders, not sure if they're going to lose their job. They have a lot of questions. There are a lot of concerns. I'm sure they're concerned about whether they're going to be able to continue to provide for their family, whatnot. So how does communication play a role? What do you see as some of the major drivers of why the first responders, injured workers are not sure about what's happening?
Well, I mean, communication, that's the job, right? That's the job. We can all be lawyers, and we can be great lawyers or bad lawyers, or it doesn't even matter, right? Because at the end of the day, it's communication and customer service. That's the job. And so I can tell you probably half of my time is I'm just educating my clients on what they're entitled to, what they can expect, how the system works, because they just don't know, right? They're on a different planet, when it comes to workers' comp. The general population, I wouldn't. Most lawyers don't know what they're entitled to, but so I wouldn't expect the claimant to understand either. 440 is a complicated statute. There's a lot of tricks and a lot of twists and turns, and so. But even the general basic stuff, people think, if I file a claim, I'm going to get fired. So I spend a lot of time just kind of talking my clients, sort of off the ledge, so to speak. You're like, look, we're going to file your claim. You're entitled to medical care or wages or, whatever it is that they're looking to get. You're not going to lose your job just because, you need a doctor.
So at what point do they typically reach out to an attorney? Is this early on in the claim, or is this after they've had some time and they're not sure and they're becoming increasingly frustrated? Help us understand how that happens and at what point in the claim process does that happen?
Well, I can only speak for the cases that I get. And because I litigate these cases, I don't get calls from people where everything is going well. Right. Nobody calls me and says, hey, I'm getting everything I want. I'm just want to talk to a lawyer. So the calls that I get are, my claim is denied. I don't know what to do. I need a new doctor. I'm not getting paid. My doctor said I'm fine, but I can't walk 10 feet, but he says I can go back to work. So the calls that I get are people typically, at a frustration breaking point, already filed their claim. We do some work when they call right at the beginning, right? That they did have heard of us and they said, okay, I need to make sure that I'm talking to somebody at the beginning. But most of the people that we talk to are well into the process and, they've hit a roadblock and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to ask for or how to ask for it. Right. And so there's usually a pain point, at some point in the process that triggers the need. Hey, I need an advocate.
Gotcha.
Paolo, you mentioned earlier, working with, both sides of the fence, professionalism, right? And that, you are so well known for that, right? That's your reputation. You've always been so known for treating folks decently, professionally. You're warm, you're always embraced by both the plaintiff bar and the defense bar. Tell us a little more about that, because, from afar, a lot of folks sort of think, they're fighting for a living every day. They must be throwing punches at each other, but that's not true, is it?
Well, and I can't say that my practice is, the example or the norm, right? I just happen to be in an area of law where, the most of the folks that I have cases against are, really a pleasure to work with. Although we may not agree on the issues, we can we can, our offices get along, our staff gets along, we can get things scheduled, we can get things moving. If we've got to go try a case, we can go in front of the judge and be professional and present our cases without, taking the gloves off. Now that's not to say that's every case. And I've certainly had my run-ins with some folks that, we just don't get along, and it can be difficult. But that, in my practice, that is the exception, not the rule. The rule is I'm happy to come to work every day, even if I've got, depositions or mediations, or I've got a final hearing or trials coming up. I know my other side well, and just that's a product of just doing this for a long time. When you get old and a gray beard, you've been doing this long enough. I can call my opposing counsel, and we can move things if we need to, or if somebody's out of town or things like that. So it's a pleasure to do work with. Even when we don't agree, we can move things along and get our clients. We can be zealous advocates for our respective clients without having to be, unprofessional or letting that stuff get in. So that's part of the practice that I enjoy, is that I hear horror stories from my friends that are lawyers. I'm like, that just sounds like a miserable existence, but I'm lucky in that way.
Paolo, the firm, you guys do statewide work. So is that a true statement, from the Panhandle all the way down to South Florida? Or is it differ?
All the way. I've got cases in Key West, all the way to Jacksonville, all the way to Pensacola, and everywhere in between. I've got clients in all 67 counties. I've tried cases in front of all 30 judges in the state of Florida. We have cases literally in everywhere, in some small towns that I've never even heard of, with 10-man police departments. We've got clients there. So pre-COVID was a lot of miles, 40,000 miles a year on my car. Post-COVID with the Zoom depots and things like that is a little bit easier. My family's grateful that I'm home more. But yeah, we're statewide. Every county in the state.
Yvonne, any questions?
Which is great because
Yeah.
I get to see some places that I never even thought I would see or hear of. But I've got the grand tour of our state. I've got the grand tour of our state many times. It's great.
I love that. I've enjoyed that as well. Towns that I never, like, where am I going today? I've never been here.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, it's fun, and I tell you, I know where every Cracker Barrel is on the highway. I can tell you, every rest stop, which has the best barbecue spot. Believe me, I got it mapped on my GPS. Anywhere I'm in the state, I know where I can get, where I can get some good barbecue.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
So, Paolo, you mentioned earlier something about, injured workers having their claims denied. Would you say that's the biggest barrier that they faced, or facing delays with their injury? Is it their claim just being denied, or what are some of the more common reasons why their claim dragged out?
Yeah, and I was thinking about this before we got on, and one of the most underutilized part of our statute, I think, is the 120-day rule. I mean, over the years, I can't tell you how many cases that I've had where if they just would have 120-dayed it, we could have avoided a lot of litigation and a lot of problems. I mean, there's a reason that that's in the statute. There's a reason why it gives you the time to get a doctor, get an opinion. I find that the carriers and the defense counsel that I work with that effectively use the 120-day rule, and they do it right. And then if a claim ultimately gets denied, there's probably a reason for that, but the, file a claim on Monday, denied on Tuesday, no 120-day, those I find, are a lot easier for me to get picked up because, you don't get an opinion. So, I'm not trying to put myself out of business, but if that was utilized more, I think the litigation would be, a lot less. Now I don't know how that works in all the other areas, with your traditional sort of, low back claims or things like that. But in my practice, in my little sort of neck of the woods, the 120-day rule would save a lot of, municipalities, the state, because that's what I deal with. I deal with counties, cities, municipalities, the state of Florida, those things would save the taxpayers a bunch of money. Just do a little investigation, get a doctor, get an opinion, and then, let's go from there.
So since your focus is mostly first responder injuries, do you think that that's why there's a high rate of denials? Is because they're first responder and those presumptions? Or tell us more about that, because I mean, we're not talking about the general injured worker population. We are, with you, talking about first responders. So why aren't people using that more?
Well, I can tell you in some areas of the state where, we have a lot of cases, the adjusters and the TPAs that I deal with, they're educated. They on this area, right? So they know, a heart claim. Some places that don't get a lot of these cases, the person adjusting the file or looking at the claim is going to say, a heart attack, that's not work related, denied, right? Not understanding that there's a presumption in place. And so, I have been fortunate to be able to go and speak to a lot of municipalities and counties, boards of county commissions, city commissions, adjusters, third TPAs, and do classes for them, teaching them how to adjust these cases, and that's always, a little bit of a mixed bag. I get a little nervous walking into those rooms, but at the end, I'm just trying to help them,
sure,
do the best job, not only for the injured worker, but, for their municipality, for their county, for their board of county commissions, right? I mean, they're all stewards of public money and they don't want to be doing extra if they don't need to. And if you can do a claim right, and if there's a legitimate claim and you get them taken care of, you get them back to work, everybody saves in the long run, right? And so, if I can help spread the word and the education that way, then, I think that's a good day. But to answer your question, I think that there's a lot of, lack of education, especially when it comes to this area. That's why we try to do these seminars like at the forum or at WCI and things like that. Try and, come in, bring your employers, bring your carriers, bring your, defense lawyers, let me explain this stuff to you. I mean, I get calls from municipalities, they're like, we don't know what to do with this case. What do we do? And then I kind of walk them through and, we get it handled. From adjusters sometimes that are unfamiliar, with this area, in order to avoid, and I always thank them. I say, look, I'm glad that you called me instead of just issuing a knee-jerk denial, right? This is what you need to do. These are the guys that defend these claims, run it by them. And, then decide, there's a 120-day rule for a reason, guys. You don't have to make a medical decision. That's why we get the doctors and we do that. So.
Great. So what would you say are some of the more common misconceptions that employers and claims professionals have specifically about responder workers? What can we do to help them with that? What are some of the misconceptions that we can do away with?
Just familiarize them with the presumptions, police officers and firefighters, get some extra benefits that your regular, employee, does not, and if an accountant has a heart attack, it's a hard case to prove. But if it's a police officer and a firefighter, there are some things that they need to do. There's a process in place. The statute's fairly clear. And, so it's just about education. I think that's the best way to get this done. The more people that understand, how to adjust and perfect these claims, the smoother the system, I think, will operate. So for me, it's just about education and spreading the word on both sides, whether it's the employee or the employer.
Well, and I think you said it earlier too. I heard you say it anyway. So I work with Institutes of Health. We're a specialty occupational health clinic based in Southern California. And one of our specialties is working with first responders, but, from the medical side of things. And one thing in our educational outreach that we do is let people know that the first responders really do want to go back to work. They love their jobs. They don't want to be out of work. And I think that's a big misconception that we're always, trying to let people know. And I think you would agree with that, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, and I spend a lot of time educating doctors too. I mean, because in this space, there aren't not very many, cardiologists who do workers' comp. So I spend a lot of time talking to the doctors, because, what happens is you'll get some doctor, up in the panhandle, a cardiologist that really isn't familiar with this area, and they get the form from the nurse case manager that says, is this work related? Check yes or no. And of course the doctor's going to put no, because
Right.
of course it's not, traditionally caused, right? That's why there's a presumption.
Right.
And so the adjuster gets it back and says, oh, the doctor said it's not work related, I'm going to deny the case. I see that weekly, and then it's like, look, okay, we don't have that burden, right? As long as we've got our other boxes checked, then it's presumed to be work related, regardless of the doctor's opinion. Let the doctor be a doctor, not a judge. And so, there is some disconnect, on the medical side too. But again, I think it all boils down to, having the conversation, having the dialogue about these cases, having the education, being willing to learn about this stuff, being willing to say, you know what, I may not be an expert in this area, but let me call somebody to get some information so that way I can make the best decision handling this case going forward. And then, we can reduce cost, I can save my employer, and everybody's, and then, oh, by the way, the claimant gets back to work and he can finish his career and retire and do all that other stuff. Right. So again, it's always about spreading the word for me and trying to, educate as many people as I can.
Awesome. Ralph, back to you.
Paolo, presumptions. Yvonne and I have been around in comp 35, 40 years. We remember the days where there were no presumptions. And then, here we are, especially after COVID, where presumptions, were used unanimously around the country to create some leveraging, if you will, and quick turnaround, compensable claims so folks can get treatment. As a result of all of that, though, we began to hear kind of the counter again, the presumptions, right? We began to hear there's now a system in place that provides almost favoritism to a certain segment of the population. Give me your thoughts on that, right? Because it's sort of a play, if you will, on what's happened on the presumption and the popularity of presumptions. But I want to hear your thoughts on that.
All right. Well, generally, that argument is nonsense. I mean, in Florida, we have a cardiac presumption for first responders. There are multiple studies. I mean, probably a dozen or more, not just one or two, talking about the stress that's associated physiologically, with that population of people. There are study after study after study, increased, sudden cardiac death, coronary artery disease. I mean, there's a doctor, Kales, who's the lead occupational doctor out of Harvard Hospital. Okay. I've had the opportunity to use him as an expert in some cases, and I've had the opportunity to depose him. And this guy is really, really, really smart. And he's done multiple studies. So anybody that says it's special treatment or anything like that, they just got to go read the data, because the incidence of cardiac problems, hypertension, sudden cardiac death in that population of people is in the hundreds of % higher than the average population. So, providing that segment of population medical care coverage for under workers' comp, I think is a no-brainer. And if you don't believe that, I hope you never have to dial 911, because you want those people coming to save you to be in good health and okay, right? So that argument in my mind just doesn't hold any water, because to me, those people haven't looked at the data. The COVID presumption was a little bit different. There was a period of time during COVID where, our legislature and the governor said, look, we've got to help some of these people. I mean, we were losing a lot of everybody was sent home except for police officers and firefighters. Okay. Right. They didn't get to go home, right? They didn't get to stay home and work from home. They got to go out and save people who are dying of COVID and getting COVID and then dying, right? They didn't get to say, well, I'm going to take this shift off, I'm going to work from home. They didn't get to do that. So I think I think finally, our legislature figured that out, and they passed that presumption, and it only lasted for a certain time.
Yeah.
That is still not going. And I can tell you firsthand that COVID was heartbreaking working during those years of COVID, because I lost a lot of clients. I lost a lot of clients. And it was very, very hard those couple of years working. I'm in quarantine in my office trying to litigate cases where my clients died of COVID. Right. And it was in filing death claims, for COVID. That was a rough period. So any naysayers on presumptions, please give them my number, and I'll be happy to set them straight.
We'll do that. Definitely.
I'll talk to him. No problem.
You got it, man.
No problem.
Yvonne, what you got?
Well, it is time to wrap it up.
Oh, come on now.
I just got here, and plus, I thought I was fancy with my 3 or 4 things on the wall, and then I look at Ralph. It's like I'm walking through the Louvre with so many works of art back there. Like, what's going on? Like, what's going on in Ralph's house?
That's a first. I hadn't thought about the Louvre.
I mean, that's what it looks like. I think there's a Michelangelo back there. I think there's a couple of Monets back there. Like, when I grow up, I want my wall to look like Ralph's.
I am gonna ask you one last question though, to sort of wrap it up, and then we'll ask another fun question. But Paolo, if there is one thing that you could change about the Florida workers' comp system to help make better outcomes for injured workers, particularly first responders, what would that be?
Choice of doctor. Choice of doctor.
That's another question I was going to ask. So for our listeners in Florida, injured workers are not allowed to choose their doctor. They have to go to a doctor that the carrier states, right, from a network.
Right. Let a claimant pick his doctor. He's not complaining about the care he's getting, right?
Yeah.
He can't blame it on the doctor.
Yeah.
There are also some studies in some other states where there's choice of medicine, and the cost is cheaper. The claims go by quicker. There's less litigation. Let a claimant pick his doctor, and they're going to be happy with their care. And they're going to get back to work sooner. The case is going to settle sooner. Going to resolve sooner, and you're going to have less litigation. So if I could change, wave my magic wand, I would say, in some cases, let them choice a doctor.
Ralph, is that ever going to happen in Florida?
Paolo can probably answer that. We have tried it. We've talked about it. We have, pushed on that. It has never seen the light of day legislatively. It's not been one of those items that has been welcomed up in Tallahassee.
No, I agree, but you asked, so I told you. I mean, that's it. I'm probably going to get some flack, as a claimant lawyer, but I think our system is working, right? I mean, it's working for generally. I get the chance to speak at a lot of conferences, like Ralph said, in other states, and there's a lot worse places than us. So I'm happy here. I'm staying here, and as long as the police and firefighters need me, I'll still be here.
That's what we generally say. Ralph and I have talked about that a lot on this podcast, even that, generally speaking, the workers' compensation system does work most of the time. It's those few times or the small percentage of times that it doesn't work. And that's the overall perception, because that's the way we humans are wired. We're just wired to focus on the negative. All right, Ralph, you get to ask the fun question to close it up.
So, Paolo, what do you do for fun? I know you've got a beautiful family. I love keeping up with you guys. I know you travel all the time, but when you're trying to get away from the stress of practice, what do you do for fun?
Well, I mean, 4 kids is a handful. So navigating teenagers is fun, right? I'm still learning the language, quite frankly. I don't know what they're telling me half the time. I just smile and nod. you know, pretend that it's a compliment that they're telling me. So I try to have fun with my kids, and you know, I mean, I like to play golf. You know, I like to get outside because that's you know, that's one of those things that, you know, I'm never going to be good at no matter how much I try and practice. So I'm just going to keep thinking I'm going to get better. But really, I mean, I work enough, you know, so really my fun time is just, you know, laughing at my kids and having them laugh at me. That's about the most fun that I can think of. And we would travel and we have a good time. And so, you know, just family time when I can get it. You know, the older you get, the more you appreciate it. So that for me that's the best vacation. That's the best medicine.
Where's the last place you guys went on a family vacation?
Well, we just recently, spring break, you know, we just went on a cruise with the kids. You know, all of us went together, and that's a hoot, you know. So, you know, I'm the butt of the jokes now, but that's okay. I have a good time, and as long as they're laughing and we're having a good time, that's fine. You
awesome.
Know. Yeah, that was
something for everybody. Something for everybody in the family on a cruise, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's nice. They can just go do their own thing, and you know, they don't want to hang out with my wife and I. So, you know.
Awesome.
Which is perfect. So they can go have a good time, and we'll see you at dinner, you know, but it's fun.
I understand. Totally. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. It's been fun. We barely scratched the surface, but you know, that's the point of these conversations. Little by little, we have these conversations, and hopefully it's helping some of the folks that are newer, and we hope to attract more young folks to the profession. So,
well, it was an honor for me. You know, thank you for just to be asked to join the group. I really appreciate it, and thank you, and hope you know, somebody will learn something. But again, thank you, and it's nice to see you, and hope to see you guys soon.
Really will. And I'm looking forward to. I get the opportunity and the honor to present with your partner Joff at WCI coming up. We're doing a session together on firefighter cancer claims.
Oh, perfect. All right. We didn't even talk about that, but Jeff will fill you in on that stuff. You don't get him started. Okay?
I know. Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us. And as we always like to say, Paolo, hasta luego.
Thanks, Paolo.
All right. Take care.